Hey, so the Fed did it. They finally cut interest rates for the first time in 4 years. So that means mortgage rates dropped too, right? Hey, welcome to this week's Mortgage Minutes with Mitch. I am Mitch Jenkins, Senior Loan Officer with Your Home Financial. So, Federal Open Market Committee met this week and dropped the federal funds rate by 50 basis points. So that means mortgage rates dropped too, right? Not exactly. So it's important to know, let's start with what the federal funds rate is. Now that's actually the rate banks charge each other to borrow money from day to day. Now why would they borrow money? Well, federal banks are required to maintain a certain amount of reserves based on how many deposits they have at any given time. And that amount goes up and down day to day as people make deposits and withdraw money. So every night they basically have to true up their balance sheet, and if they're short on the required reserves based on how much money they have at that time, they need to borrow from another bank to make sure that they have the requirement per federal law. So that's what that federal funds rate is, what they charge each other to borrow money. Now what you pay as on say like a mortgage rate, that is going to be the federal funds rate plus the company's margin. So they typically have built-in money on top of that to make sure that they are making money, because if they're borrowing money from someone else, they want to make sure that if they're lending you money that they're making a profit. So kind of a simplification, but hopefully that makes sense. Now what happened this week is the Federal Reserve lowered their federal funds rate by 50 basis points. Now we all knew a rate drop was coming, we just didn't know by how much. Could have been 25, could have been 50. Leading up to this week, a lot of people were expecting 50, and that's just because some of the pressure we've been seeing is in unemployment and the overall health of the economy. So the Fed, if you remember, has two mandates. One is to control inflation, which has been out of control but starting to get under control lately, and they also need to maximize employment, which has been really, really strong but starting to show some weakness lately. So the tricky part of this is the Federal Reserve controlling rates to a point where it's not too restrictive on the economy, but also in a way that helps temper inflation. So lately we've had what's called an inverted yield curve, and I know I'm getting pretty technical here, but bear with me. Now what that means is the shorter term rates are higher than longer term rates. Now that's kind of the opposite of what it should be, because typically if you invest your money longer, you should get a higher rate of return. But when you hit an inverted yield curve, that means shorter term rates are higher, and that's not good, because typically when you come out of it, if you look at the historical numbers here, when you have an inverted yield curve, when you come out of that, you enter a recession. That's what these dark gray bars are here. So every time the yield curve's inverted or even gets close, there's typically a recession. The width of that gray bar denotes how long that recession was. So the Fed has been preaching a soft landing, and that's what they're hoping this time. But I mean, if you go back here in history, it's not likely that we're going to avoid a recession as much as everyone's been saying that. Now, I'm optimistic, don't get me wrong, but the reason this matters is because even though the Federal Reserve cut 50 basis points, a lot of investors are a little bit spooked by the fact that they went 50 basis points, because it shows that maybe they think the Fed is a little behind the curve. I mean, there are some members that think they should have cut back in July, so there's clearly some concern of the overall health of the economy and the job market if they went that aggressive. So what I do know is that we still need the dust to settle. As we go forward, you can expect mortgage rates to drop. Now, it's not going to plummet. It's not going to drop 50 basis points in a single day. But hopefully, as the dust settles and that yield curve rights itself, we'll start to see things normalize, if there is such a thing anymore. And hopefully, interest rates will continue to drop. So just know that the longer you wait and the more rates drop, the more people are going to enter the buying pool, and competition is going to get tougher. So if you are looking to make a purchase, I would recommend sooner than later. You can always refinance if rates drop enough and it makes sense once you own that home. So here to help. Let me know what I can do. As always, thank you for watching. We'll see you next week.